Good day everyone, and welcome to Chronicles Unraveled Show. I'm your host Carla Martins, and I'm so grateful to have you with us today. This show is all about sharing real stories, inspiring conversations, and giving a voice to those who have something important to say. And today, we have a very special guest with us, someone whose journey is one of strength, resilience, and courage. She has faced challenges, overcome obstacles, and today, she's here to share her story with all of us. So, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Miss Mirabelle Adams. Miss Mirabelle, thank you for being here. We are honored to have you, and I know your story will touch so many hearts today.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Carla. I'm so honored to be here, and my story goes like this. One day, my mother and father had gone to the farm earlier that day with my older siblings. Blessing, faith, favor, prosper in God's power. I had chicken pox, so I was left at home with Success. Success was my cousin, and she lives with us. My parents didn't want to leave me, but they had to harvest the maize at the farm, before it dries up, or get eaten by birds. Success didn't want to watch me, but she volunteered, so that when my parents were gone, she could go with her friends to swim, and avoid farm work. So as soon as my family went out, she came to my room and told me she was leaving.
There is some food in the kitchen if you get hungry later. I will be back soon,
she says as she dashed out. She knows I wouldn't report. The chicken pox made me fall into an uncomfortable sleep, and when I woke up, I was hungry. I went into the kitchen, and saw that Jackie, our dog, was eating my food. Oh no, what do I do? I walked away from the kitchen. As I came out of our kitchen, I saw Mr. Sebastian. Mr. Sebastian was an old man who lived alone. He was also a family friend. His house and ours are very close.
Mirabelle, how are you? I heard you have chicken pox, so you couldn't go to the farm today.
Good afternoon, sir. I am fine.
Good. So are you alone?
Yes, sir.
You don't look happy. What is wrong?
I told him about my food that our dog ate. So he told me not to worry, as he went into his kitchen and brought me food. I was just 12 years old then, so I didn't think it was wrong to eat the food he gave me. And he was a family friend. So I just ate the food. I never knew that was the beginning of my end. Success came home an hour after I ate the food, and I told her about how Jackie ate my food, and how Mr. Sebastian was kind enough to help me by giving me food from his house. Success didn't seem to care. She just rushed to the kitchen to cook our evening meal before my parents came back from the farm. When our parents got back, I told them about Mr. Sebastian giving me food when Jackie ate mine. I didn't tell them about Success leaving the house. I didn't want her to get in trouble, so I told them Success was sleeping, so I didn't want to wake her when Jackie ate my food. My parents were thankful for the help, and decided to thank Mr. Sebastian the next day. Later that night, after falling asleep, I had a dream. I saw myself among a group of people wearing black gowns. I was the youngest there, and it was so scary. I looked around and saw Mr. Sebastian there. He came to me, and I cried for him to take me home. He told me not to worry, that I was now among special people, and that they would make all my wishes and requests come true. This made me stop crying. I saw it as an opportunity to help my family, so I asked them to make my father rich. They gave me a calabash and asked me to put it under my parents' bed. They told me that it would make us rich. They also warned me not to tell anybody about them and the calabash, or my father would die. I accepted the calabash, then I woke up. At first, I thought it was just a dream, but then, I saw an identical calabash by my bed. I usually slept beside Success, and she was still asleep, so I tiptoed out of our room. I took the calabash to my parents' room, and put it under their bed. The next morning, I was so excited and happy about what happened. I was so proud of myself, for supposedly helping my family. Before going to the farm, my mom had taken me to Mr. Sebastian's house to thank him for his help the previous day. They had no clue what he had done to their innocent kid. If only they knew. 3 days later, I was awakened by my mother's scream. I woke up with a start and ran to my mom's room. When I got there, I saw my mother sitting on the ground wailing. My other siblings were also there. "Brother Favor, what is wrong with Mama?"
Can't you see Papa's hurt?
he said, pointing to my father who was lying on the bed. I didn't notice him when I entered, but then I saw what was wrong. My dad's right leg was decaying, and it had maggots all over it. My dad was fine the previous night, so I couldn't understand what went wrong. I turned to look at the sad faces of my family. I didn't know what to do, so I went to Mr. Sebastian to ask for help, since he told me he would make all my wishes come true. All I wanted then was for my father to be healed. When I saw him, I told him about my father's predicament, and asked him for help. He told me it was my fault. He said I didn't place the calabash rightly, and now my father would die because of me. They never told me how to place the calabash, so I was confused. But as a 12 years old naive child, I didn't know I was being manipulated. Mr. Sebastian sent me home, and told me he would make my father better. He also told me I was a bad person who made my father sick. I went home feeling guilty, not knowing what else to do, but believing Mr. Sebastian's lies. My dad never got better. He was diagnosed at the community hospital of having leg cancer. He couldn't go to the farm anymore, and this made our daily income to decrease, while our expenditure increased. We had to purchase a set of crutches for my father, so he could move around the house. I was always left at home to look after my father. This wasn't what I wanted. I complained day after day to Mr. Sebastian, but he always told me they were working on it. One fateful day, while I was complaining to Mr. Sebastian again, my dad walked in on us. I never knew if he heard what we were saying, but the next day, my father died. As usual, Mr. Sebastian told me it was my fault. It was a sad event for my family. I cried my eyes out that day, and at the burial. People tried consoling me, but I knew I didn't deserve their consolations, because I did it. I killed my father. After my father's death, everything cooled down. I tried to avoid Mr. Sebastian at all cost. I wasn't asked to do anything else in my dreams. The meetings in my dream continued, but I was only a spectator. I watched people offer their family members. 2 years later, things started getting better for my family. My sister Blessing got married to a rich contractor from the city, and this made our standard of living to improve. My brother Favor also got admitted into the university. Mr. Justins, my sister's husband, provided money for all his school expenses. He also promised to sponsor Favor throughout his 5 years of studying electrical engineering. Joy was back in my family, but then, I got an unexpected visit. Success and I had just retired to our room after eating. She told me stories about Warri, which was where she lived with her mother, before she came to live with us. I laughed a lot that night to her tales. Little did I know that that was the last laugh that would leave my lips for a long time. Success fell asleep before me. As soon as I closed my eyes to sleep, I felt someone tap me. I opened my eyes to see who it was, and standing before me was my father's ghost. He was clothed in white, and he was crying. I sat up to touch him, but my hand went through him. I cried and begged him to forgive me. I told him I was sorry, but he just kept crying. I tried to touch him again, and that was when Success shook me. Apparently, it was a dream. Success held me, and tried to console me. She asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't say anything.
I heard you saying, "I am sorry for killing you, Papa, please forgive me. So you better start telling me what is going on, or else I will report you to Mama."
You can't, it was just a stupid dream, forget about it.
No, I want to help you. Tell me what is wrong. You used to always be a vibrant girl, but ever since Dad died, you became introverted. Tell me what is wrong.
I can't, you don't understand. I tried to explain, but she was already moving towards the door. but suddenly, she just slumped and fell. Success. You are scaring me, wake up. I tried to wake her, but then, my mom entered the room.
Mirabelle, what is wrong? What happened to Success?
I don't know, she just fell. My mother started wailing and screaming for help. Faith, Prosper, God's Power, Mr. Sebastian, and some of our other neighbors rushed into the room. Soon, the room was filled with wailing women and children. I just stood there, too shocked to utter a word. I looked from Success' lifeless body, to Mr. Sebastian. Since he came in, he has been giving me secret smiles, and this made me suspicious. What have you done?
I just did what you wanted.
I didn't want that. I don't want her to die. I never wanted this.
I just did what you wished for. You wished she was dead in your mind, right?
What? I was just angry. Please wake her up. Please.
What is done, so you better go there and cry for your cousin.
He said and walked out. I dragged my depleted body over to where my family was, and just like he said, I cried for my cousin. Nobody suspected anything. Of course I was just a 15 years old quiet child. What harm could I possibly do in their eyes? But I could already feel that my time here was already coming to an end. After the death of Success, I shut down completely. My mother didn't notice anything, because she was always busy with the farm, and our kiosk at the market. In school, I was always alone. I didn't want my friends to get hurt, or die because of me, so I avoided them. I never paid attention in class. I was just an empty shell, waiting for when calamity will strike again. My next victim was my PHE teacher. Miss Green was a chubby middle-aged woman. I was sick that fateful day, so I wasn't participating in the exercise with my other classmates. She came to me and asked why I wasn't participating. I told her I was sick, so I couldn't join in. She just looked at me with disgust and fury.
You think pretending to be sick will get you out of participating, right? You are so mistaken. Now go over there and pick pin.
But I can't, ma'am, I am really sick, I am not pretending. I said, trying to convince her. But the more I begged, the angrier she became. She dragged me to the teacher's office, where I was flogged and disgraced. My sickness escalated because of the strokes of cane I received. That night, I made sure I didn't wish her death, because the last time I did, Success died. I stayed at home for 2 days after that. When I went back to school, I heard Miss Green was dead. She drowned at the village stream. So again, I have caused another death. I know talking to Mr. Sebastian won't help, so I kept quiet. Days later, Aunt Rose, my mom's sister, came to visit us with her 2 children. Maro, the first daughter of Auntie Rose, was assigned to my room, which was the only available room in the house at that time. I protested, but nobody listened. They thought I was just being selfish. That night, I stayed awake. I couldn't sleep from fear of what would happen. Hours after Maro fell asleep, I was still awake watching over her. I watched over her till dawn, before sleep took me. Some time later, I heard my mom enter my room. It was a Saturday, and we had to go to the farm. I opened my eyes, and turned and told her I was already awake. She smiled, then moved to the other side of the bed to wake Maro. She tapped Maro's shoulder and called her name, but there was no reply. We thought she was just a deep sleeper, so I called her name louder and shook her. Still no reply. That was when I noticed that Maro hadn't moved an inch from where she slept last night. Apparently, while I kept watch over her throughout the night, she was already dead. Auntie Rose was devastated. She accused my mother of being a witch who killed her husband and Maro. My mother just kept apologizing, while looking at me. It was at that time she knew something was wrong with me. After the death of Maro, Mr. Sebastian informed me that I was of age to start performing yearly sacrifice. He said if I didn't offer anybody, they would help me choose. Maro was just the first sacrifice. A family meeting was called after Maro's burial, to discuss the allegations towards my mother. Blessing and her husband also came for the meeting. My mother denied knowing anything about the death of my father and her niece, Maro. Since there was no evidence, the matter was dropped to Auntie Rose's disappointment. Sister Blessing and her husband stayed for a week. The night before their departure, my mother called a meeting in our sitting room. At the meeting, she asked Auntie Blessing and her husband to take me to live with them in Warri, so I could write my work there, and help my sister in her boutique shop. My sister and her husband accepted. Justin's, my sister's husband, left the next day because of his business, while my sister stayed for additional 3 days to help me pack and get ready for our trip. I had mixed feelings about going to Warri. I was happy that I was leaving, because I would be far away from my family and wouldn't hurt them anymore. Also, I wouldn't see Mr. Sebastian anymore. I thought maybe if I was far away, they wouldn't haunt me anymore. But I was sad because if they still tormented me, I would be bringing destruction to my sister's family, but I had no choice, I had to go. My village in Ughelli wasn't far from Warri, so the journey wasn't a long one, but the transition from thatched houses, a few block houses, and dusty footpaths to story buildings, and tarred roads was fascinating. I was excited. I hoped it was a new beginning. Sister Blessing's house was a duplex. It was like a palace. When I entered through the gate, I was flabbergasted. Sister Blessing laughed beside me as the gate man took my things inside. I was shown my room, where I took my bath in the beautiful bathroom. After taking my bath, I was called to the dining room for dinner. Mr. Justin's wasn't at home when we arrived, but he was already sitting at the dining room when I entered. I could already perceive the aroma of jollof rice. I was directed to a chair beside my sister. I sat as my sister served our meal. My sister's husband was just smiling at my sister like she meant the whole world to him as she served. I envied what they had, but I knew I didn't deserve to envy them, because of all the things I have done. After I was served, I started eating, but felt that I was being watched, so I raised my head. Mr. Justin's was looking at me with a disapproving stare.
You didn't pray before eating. Mirabelle, you should always pray before eating, don't they teach you that in church?
My parents were never staunch Christians, so we didn't really appreciate the essence of prayer. We only went to church when we were invited for dedications or burials. We never knew Christ. Our names were biblical, but that was not because we were religious, but because my parents wanted to belong. Mr. Justin sighed when he saw I wasn't saying anything. He held my hands and my sister's, as he prayed for the meal. That was the first time I noticed the power in the name of Jesus. As soon as Mr. Justin said, "In Jesus' name," my heart leapt, and I felt my body going hot throughout the prayer. It was a strange feeling that I didn't understand at that time. After the prayer, we ate and I left to my room. I was still thinking about my body's reaction to prayer, when my auntie walked into the room. She gave me a new phone, and told me I would be starting my WEC lesson the next week. She said it was evening lesson, so I could help her in the shop. I thanked her, and she told me to go down for night devotion, and again, my heart skipped. My auntie led the songs, and I tried to flow, but I didn't know the songs very well. Mr. Justin's led the prayers, and the same feeling of heat enveloped me. After the prayers, I went to my room to sleep. And that night there was no meeting. Was I saved, or were they just giving me time to adjust? Six days went by, and I didn't have any dreams or meeting. 6 days of daily morning and night devotions. I had gone with my sister to her boutique for 5 days. My life seemed normal, and the WEC lesson was starting the next day. The morning I started the WEC lesson was not eventful. I just went to the store. Then by 3:30 p.m., my sister took me to attend the lesson, as I wasn't familiar with the town. After my sister got me registered, she left me there after giving me tea fare to go home. I was nervous about going into the class, so I stood at the entrance of the class for a while. I was just standing there, when I felt someone's hands on my shoulder. I turned and saw a guy behind me. He was still holding my shoulder, and he was smiling. That smile did something to my tummy. It was like hundreds of butterflies were dancing in my stomach.
I am sorry, but you were blocking the entrance. You seemed lost in thoughts. By the way, I'm Fred.
He stretched his other hand towards me and watched me. He was handsome, tall, had broad shoulders, and a stunning smile. Still, I didn't reply. I never had any illusions in my mind that I would have a happy ending because of all I've done. So instead of replying, I walked into the class. I walked to an empty seat at the back of the class and sat down. I didn't know if and when Mr. Sebastian and his crew would act again, but I didn't want to befriend anybody. I won't take any chances that cold hurt innocent people again. Fred didn't look offended that I ignored him. He just kept smiling at me, even when he walked to his seat, which coincidentally was behind mine. Throughout the class that day, I felt his presence behind me. I tried not to look behind me at him, but after an hour of trying, I gave in to temptation and looked behind me. He was sitting back in his chair looking at me with a big grin on his face, like he knew I couldn't resist looking at him. I turned forward and blushed. The classes fled by, and soon, it was over. And I only looked thrice. That was a big achievement. Fred was like a magnet. As soon as the last teacher left the class, I packed my books with lightning speed and rushed out of the class. I only slowed down when I got to a street junction. I had told my sister that I knew my way back home, but now I was confused. Everywhere looked identical. I tried to concentrate and remember the right way, but then, somebody touched my shoulder. It was already dark, so I thought maybe it was a robber, but when I turned, I saw it was Fred and his stupid smile. Okay, not stupid, but still, what's with this guy and my shoulder?
Hey mystery girl, you left your pen by your desk.
Mystery girl.
Yeah, you didn't tell me your name when I told you mine earlier, so I decided to call your mystery girl.
You know that's not funny, right? And that's not my pen.
I know. I just wanted to talk to you. You just keep walking or running away from me.
Well, that is because I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to know you. So please stop talking to me, so I can figure out my way home.
Wait, you are lost. Don't worry, your Prince Charming is here to rescue you. I'll take you home. I know I am kind. No need to thank me.
I don't need your help, just go away.
Look, I get it, you don't want to talk to me, but please just let me take you home. It's already late, you could get in trouble.
He had a point, so I gave him my sister's address. He walked me to our gate, and before I could thank him, he walked away. The next day, I was so excited to go for the lessons. I knew I should not get close to Fred, but I just couldn't help it. He was good looking, kind of funny and kind. So I decided, I could just look and admire him without getting close. At the lesson that day, I got a seatmate. Her name was Teresa, and she was nice and jovial. She was the kind of girl I could befriend if my life was normal. She tried talking to me, but I just shut her off and pretended to be engrossed in the lesson. Meanwhile, my attention was on Fred. He didn't seem to be paying attention either. He was really focused on what he was drawing on a paper. I couldn't really see what he was drawing though. At the end of the lesson, Teresa asked me where I lived so we could walk home together. I thought of an excuse to use to avoid going with her, but before I could voice it out, someone answered for me.
She already has a walking home buddy.
I turned to look at Fred and he smiled at me. Teresa looked to me for confirmation, and I nodded my head.
All right, see you tomorrow, Mirabelle, and you artist boy.
Mirabelle.
Fred said, testing my name on his lips, and that made me shudder. The sound of my name on his lips made goosebumps to break out on my hands. I rubbed the goosebumps away as I walked away from him.
Hey, wait for me, we are supposed to be going home together, right?
Good night, Fred.
Come on, you already told your friend, so from now on, we walk home together. Or else you want her to know you are avoiding her.
Okay, fine. I just have to endure walking home with you every day for 3 months. Such a hardship.
Yay.
He grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the class, and it felt like electricity was running through where our hands were connected. He never let go of my hand till we got to my gate. This time, I thanked him. He just smiled and said, "Anything for you, beautiful." This made me blush, and he laughed at me. I have never thought of myself as beautiful. I never even paid any attention to how I looked, but hearing him call me beautiful made me want to be beautiful for him. So the next day, I made a little effort and I applied my sister's pink lip gloss. He noticed, and commented on how pretty my lips were. From that day, I always applied the lip gloss, just to see him glance at my lips whenever he talked to me while we walked home together every night. Teresa still kept on being friendly. She teased me about Fred, but I told her, Fred and I were not even friend. 2 weeks later, she invited me to her birthday party. I told her I couldn't attend, but she still gave me the invite card. I asked Fred if he would attend, and he said he would, if I agreed to go with him. I laughed it off, and told him, he better go, so he could find another girl to pest. He just squeezed my hands and grinned. The thought of him finding another girl left a bitter taste in my mouth, but it would be for his own good, I told myself. A month after moving to Warri, I was still free. There was no meetings, no Mr. Sebastian. Nothing. I now had friends. Fred and Teresa. I was now trying my best to get close to people, but there was still a little fear at the back of my mind, that something would go wrong again. Mr. Justins was a spirit-filled man who loved the things of God, and he still led the morning and evening devotions. I was now familiar with the songs and some Bible verses. I really loved Psalm 91:1, which said, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High, shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." This became my favorite verse, because I felt I was under God's shadow, so no Mr. Sebastian could come near me. One fateful Sunday after service, the teenage coordinator of Mr. Justin's church invited all the teenagers to a praise program. Mr. Justins encouraged me to go, and I went. That was how I met Jesus Christ. During the worship session, the Holy Spirit came upon me, and I started speaking in tongues I did not understand. I was called to the altar and prayed for. After that encounter, I felt inner peace. There was no more fear. Teresa's birthday was a weekend from that encounter, so I decided to attend. I called Fred to tell him of my decision, and he was ecstatic. My sister was also happy that I wanted to attend the party, because it meant I was now socializing. The night before the birthday party, my sister brought a beautiful dress from her shop for me to wear. It was a red pencil dress that reached above my knee. It was form-fitting, and it looked great on me. Fred came to pick me in his father's car. He told me how beautiful I looked, and I just blushed, which made him laugh. Then he drove me to the party, which was at Teresa's house. I never knew Fred was from a rich family, as he never talked about it. The party wasn't a big one. It consisted of mostly family and few friends. Fred and I went over to Teresa and wished her a happy birthday. There was music and games. It was fun, especially the part when I danced with Fred. I didn't want to dance, but he pulled me from my chair, held my hands, and moved us to the beat of the music. It was fun watching him dance. He wowed me and the rest of his female spectators. It was getting late, so we bade Teresa and her parents farewell as we walked to the car. The drive home was silent. Fred seemed to be lost in thoughts, so I let him think. After parking outside my gate, he came out of the car and helped me with the door. He was standing so close to the open door, and when I came out of the car, we were so close. I could feel the heat of his body, and could also smell his cologne, and although I wanted to push him away, I could not. It felt good to be close to him and strangely right. When he lowered his head to kiss me, my mouth moved up to meet his, and several long minutes passed before sanity asserted itself. Minutes in which I felt the moist softness of his lips, and feeling surged through my heart. I broke the kiss when I remembered where we were. I didn't look up at him. I felt so embarrassed, so instead, I ran into the house and locked the gate without saying goodbye. As soon as I locked it, I rested on the gate and slid down to sit on the floor and cried. I cried for a different life where I could like a good guy without fear of getting him killed. A different life where I wasn't a killer. I heard him knock, but ignored him as I sat on the cold ground crying. Some time later, I heard his car leave, and that was when I stood up, wiped my tears, and went inside the house to my room. That night I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about Fred. I kept thinking about his kiss. I also wondered if he hated me for running away after our kiss. Kissing Fred made me realize my feelings for him. It also made me want to fix my life. Before now, I had no dream. I just went through life like a routine, waiting for disaster to strike, or for karma to catch up with me for everything I did. But now I wanted to dream. I wanted to have a life. That night, I thought about what I would love to do in the future. I had wanted to be an accountant before my life changed. I was an art student, and I was good at math, so I made up my mind to pursue a career in accounting. This got me excited. I also decided to forget about my past. I was now in Christ, so I am a new creature. The next day, which was a Sunday, I woke up with purpose. Then I went to the kitchen to help my sister prepare the meal. My sister was already washing the ingredients to prepare fried rice, and that was when I knew that Sunday was special, coupled with the smile on my sister's face. At the dining room after prayers, my sis said she had good news to share. Mr. Justins, who looked excited, asked her what the good news was. Turned out the couple were expecting a baby. She was already 2 months gone. My sis had been sick for a while, so she had gone for checkup the previous day while I went to Teresa's birthday. We ate our food with joy in our hearts, and Mr. Justin said we would celebrate the good news after church. The couple had been married for almost 2 years, so the news was making everybody excited. After church, Mr. Justins took us to AJ to celebrate. We ate a lot of food and had ice cream for dessert. My sis was glowing, and Mr. Justins was beaming. It was a memorable day. I went for lessons the next day, nervous and excited to see Fred. I don't know if things between us would change after our kiss. To my disappointment, Fred didn't attend the lesson that day. I thought he was just trying to avoid me, so I didn't worry too much. Teresa asked me about his absence, and I told her about our kiss. She was so excited for me, and assured me it was going to be okay. She also thanked me for attending her birthday party. 4 days later, and Fred was still a no-show. I never took his number, so I couldn't call him, so I collected his address info from his friend, Tom. The next day, I went in search of the house. I boarded taxi to get me there. The house was like my sister's. I knocked, and a uniformed gateman came out.
Who do you seek?
I'm looking for Fred. I'm his friend. We attend the same lesson.
Okay, wait here, let me call him.
Okay.
What are you doing here, Mirabelle?
I was just worried about you. You missed a full week of lesson. Now that I know you are fine, I can just go home since you don't seem to want me here.
Wait. I am sorry if I seem hostile, Mirabelle. I am just stressed out. This week has been hell for my father and I. My grandfather came to visit us, and my dad doesn't seem happy about it. He is just an old man, so I wonder why my dad doesn't want him near us. My dad doesn't want me to leave the house. He keeps telling me to watch the house.
Okay, I thought maybe something happened to you, or if maybe kissing me scared you away from the lesson.
Of course not. I loved kissing you. I would love a repeat though.
An old man pokes his head out of the gate, and when I saw his face, my blood goes cold as I go. Fred was about to kiss me again when I felt someone was watching us. I turned to see who, and that was when I got the biggest shock of my life. My heart started beating so fast, it felt like I was having a heart attack. Standing by Fred's gate was no other than Mr. Sebastian. And he was smiling at me. Fred noticed my attention was on someone else at his gate, so he turned too.
Granddad, I told you not to come out. Dad doesn't want you walking around.
I heard Fred say, but it was like he was far away, because his voice felt distant to my ears. Granddad. I asked no one in particular. I see Fred turn to me and ask me if I was alright, but he was just a blur. Fred raised his hand and wiped the tears that I didn't notice were already falling. Mr. Sebastian walked toward us, and I started walking backwards trying to get away from him as fast as I could, but my brain's commands were not registering to my feet. And then I felt his hand touch me, which sent a shiver down to my spine, and that was when my feet started moving. And I ran. Fred ran after me, but I entered a taxi before he could reach me. I looked back and saw him chasing after the car while shouting my name. I just told the taxi driver to drive faster. I wiped my tears when I got to the house. It was already night, and my sister would be home, and I didn't want her to see me crying. I would not be able to explain the reason for my tears. So, putting on a poker face, I walked into the house. The scene I witnessed when I entered the house was heart-wrenching. My sis was on the floor in a pool of her blood screaming. Mr. Justins was trying to calm her down, as our gate man called an ambulance on the landline. Mr. Justin's face was pure torment. As I looked at the kind couple who had cared for me all this while, Mr. Sebastian's smiling face kept flashing in my mind. Once again, I have caused calamity. An ambulance came and carried my sister. Mr. Justins had accompanied her to the hospital. I didn't follow them. As soon as the ambulance left, I ran upstairs to pack my things inside a suitcase. I couldn't stay here anymore. Mr. Sebastian had found me, and now my sister's family was in danger. Before leaving, I wrote a letter explaining that I had to leave for their safety. I was a witch, and now I had caused my sister her baby. Then I called Teresa, who gave me some money which I used to go back to the village. I was now ready to face my past. Throughout the drive to Ughelli, I made up my mind to confess and tell the whole world about Mr. Sebastian and his cohorts. Many other innocent children could suffer the same fate as me, if I don't expose them. I knew there would be consequences for exposing their coven, but I was ready for anything. There would be no more death in my household. Before leaving, I had sent a text to Fred, telling him I loved him, and that I was grateful to him for showing me how to live and dream. I also told Teresa I would not be coming back. Even though she didn't know my reason for leaving, we cried together and bade each other farewell. As soon as I got to my village, the first thing I did was to go to the church and pray. I was going to ask God for forgiveness, and commit my spirit to God, but when I got there, a pastor was standing at the entrance of the church, and as soon as he saw me, he called my name. This was strange because I wasn't a member of that church when I was in the village, so it wasn't possible that he knew me. He walked towards me and I just stared, dumbfounded. He told me he was Pastor Paul, and that while he was praying, God instructed him to stand at the entrance of the church and wait for a young woman. He said God said he should tell the young woman whose name was Mirabelle to go and wait at home, for the Lord would soon visit her household. I didn't understand the message, but I decided to just go home and wait for the Lord's visit. I thanked the pastor and left the church after he prayed for me. When I got home, my mother was surprised to see me. She was so happy, and my other sibling Prosper, who was still living with my mother, came to take my suitcase to my old room. I told my mother that I missed her, and that was the reason I came home. She believed me and cooked me my favorite meal that night. After bathing, I retired to my old room. I took out the olive oil that I carried from Warri and sprayed it around the room. I covered the room with the blood of Jesus, prayed, and then slept. That night, there was no meeting.
All through Saturday night and Sunday, I had been thinking about Mirabelle and our kiss. I had wanted to kiss her since the first day I saw her looking nervous and beautiful, and I finally had her in my arms on Saturday night before she ran away from me. I needed to talk to her, but unfortunately, I didn't have her number. Finally it's Monday, and I can't wait to talk to her. Tell her how much I love her, and hopefully, kiss her again. My life had never been as fun and bright as it became ever since I met her. While I was getting ready to leave, our gate man came in to tell me there was an old man at the gate claiming to be a relation. I had never met any of our relations, and when I asked Dad why, he said we didn't have any. He told me he was an orphan, and that my mom's family disowned my mother when she married him. I went to the gate to see the old man who claimed he was a relation. He wore a worn-out top, with a faded trouser. He looked fragile, and had white hair scattered all over his hair and beard. I asked him what he wanted, and he told me he came to find his son, Mr. Nate Hernandez. I looked at him from head to toe, and different questions flashed through my head. How did he know my father's name? Was he really my grandfather, and if yes, why did my father say he had no relation? He was an old man, and I couldn't leave him outside, so I brought him into the house, and entertained him with water, before going upstairs to get my phone to call my father. My father sounded alarmed on the phone when I told him about the mysterious man claiming to be his father. He told me he was on his way home, and to watch the old man. I gave up all hopes of seeing Mirabel that day, when my father came home and told me to go up to my room. I could hear heated conversation as I walked upstairs. That week was so tiring, as my dad told me to stay at home and watch his father every time he went to work. I was to report all his activities to my father. None of my questions were answered. My dad just looked more apprehensive every day. 5 days went by, and I was still on watching duties. My grandpa didn't do anything unusual, and I was getting tired of watching him, but later that day, my gateman came to tell me a girl was outside the gate asking for me. I wondered who it was, but then I saw it was Mirabel. I almost drove her away because of my irritable attitude, but I got her to stay, and I was about to taste her lips again when she turned white. She was looking at my gate shocked. I looked to see my grandpa, and when I scolded him for coming outside, she turned paler. I asked her what was wrong, but I don't think she heard me. She just kept staring at him and moving away from me. My grandpa walked to her to see what was wrong, but that made her more scared, and when he touched her, she bolted. I ran after her, but she entered a taxi, so I couldn't get to her. I stopped by the side of the road to think about her unusual reaction to my grandpa, but I couldn't think of any explanation for it. I turned back and walked back home, because that was the only place I could get answers. I needed to talk to my grandfather. When I got to the house, I saw my father's car in the compound. I continued walking, but when I got to the door, I could hear my father shouting. I was going to open the door, when I heard my father mention my mother, so I stood there listening. I already gave you my wife. What else do you want from me? Stop whining, like you aren't enjoying the wealth you gained from her death. I never wanted her to die, I only agreed to give our unborn children to get wealthy. She had 6 miscarriages, isn't that enough blood? Fred survived, so she had to die, and now, I need more. Why now, after all these years? My source of sacrifice ran dry. The little girl I deceived into killing her family left the village, and I couldn't locate her spirit anymore. I just saw her, and touching her burnt me. She has protection now. I couldn't take it anymore, so I opened the door. They looked at me shocked. You killed my mother, now you want Mirabel. Oh my God. No wonder she ran away when she saw you. What did you do to her? I didn't do anything to her. Liar. I tried, but I couldn't catch her spirit. I just made her think she was a killer. I tried possessing her, but her spirit was too strong. I could only summon her spirit, but couldn't possess her. She was a naive kid, so I just deceived her, and made it seem like she killed all the people I killed. I walked out of the house. I needed to find Mirabel.
I woke up the next day with a feeling of unease. I felt something was going to happen that day. I knelt beside my bed and prayed, thanking God for a peaceful night, and I also reminded him of his promise to visit. After my prayers, I walked to the living room where my mother was.
Good morning, Mama. Mirabel, now that you have woken up, we have to talk about the real reason why you came back. And no lies.
I'm so sorry, Mom. I have wanted to tell you for so long. I have been possessed by Mr. Sebastian, after he gave me food years ago. Do you remember that day?
Mr. Sebastian, we trusted him, and he touched my little girl. Mirabel, you should have told us.
How could I? He threatened to kill anybody I told.
My baby, I'm so sorry for not noticing on time. When I noticed something was wrong with you, was when Maro died. I didn't know what was really going on, but I knew I had to get you out of here. I'm so sorry, my little girl.
I'm sorry, Mom.
It's okay, my child. Everything will be all right.
We cried together, but then we hear a knock on our door. My mom walked to her room, while I wiped my tears, then walked to the door and opened it.
Hi.
What are you doing here? How did you find me?
I saw your letter.
What? So you know I killed my sister's unborn child.
Mirabelle, listen to me. Your sister's baby is fine, and so is she. There is nothing wrong with you.
They are fine.
Yes, so you can come back with me.
No, Fred, you don't understand. I'm a walking death machine. Anybody I love dies, so stay away from me. Please go back home.
No, Mirabelle, you are not a witch. My grandfather was just manipulating you, but I am here to help you. Come with me. Your father knew about Mr. Sebastian's evil powers, but didn't do anything because of guilt. The only way to destroy Mr. Sebastian is to break the bond that connects you both.
Bound.
Yes, a bond. Your father has been sacrificing his unborn children to Mr. Sebastian for wealth. Then, when your mother got pregnant again, your father thought she was going to have another miscarriage, but was surprised when the pregnancy didn't end like the others. He assumed that maybe Mr. Sebastian had had enough. However, after your mother gave birth to you, 3 months later, you became very sick. Doctors couldn't detect what was wrong with you, so your father knew instantly that Mr. Sebastian had a hand in it. He went to plead with him, willing to do anything to keep you alive. Mr. Sebastian took your mother as a replacement. He transferred some of his evil powers to you, allowing you to regain your health. That power is the bond that connects you two. The day you die, he will also leave this planet, and likewise, the day he dies, you will also perish. But Pastor, if the bond is broken, will I die? Certainly not. Nothing will happen to you by God's grace.
But what about him? Will he die?
Let's do our part and leave the rest in God's hands.
The pastor invited his prayer warriors and we prayed, and prayed, and prayed.
I will confess. I will confess.
People gathered and they surrounded him. Mr. Sebastian was on the ground confessing everything he did. He confessed about the people he killed, the wombs he shut, the destinies of youths in the village he took, and so on. People were screaming and swearing at Mr. Sebastian, and suddenly, a mysterious thunder strikes and hit Mr. Sebastian and he died instantly. Mr. Sebastian's corpse was burnt. That night, the Spirit of God moved round the village and killed all the members of the coven. Mysterious sickness were also healed that night. Some people who were pregnant for more than a year, delivered. Even Mrs. Owen, who had been in labor for 4 days, gave birth that night. The village began to progress again. That day, I removed the calabash from under my mother's bed, broke it, and burned it. A week later, my sister and her husband came to visit us in the village. Mr. Justins prayed for our family, and they decided I would go back to live with them, so I could write my WEC, which was already close. I agreed.